welcome to Procurement Pivots, the podcast for procurement professionals wanting to navigate change successfully and create career success on your own terms. I'm Donna Bowden, procurement career coach and founder of Narrate Your Career.
And I'm Laura Sellers, executive coach for procurement and founder of Coaching for Procurement. And between us, we bring almost 25 years of supporting and working with procurement professionals. And it's fair to say we've navigated many of our own career pivots along the way. And now we're here to help you do the same.
Each episode will share practical strategies, honest conversations, and expert insights to help you confidently tackle the changes and challenges in your procurement career.
Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Procurement Pivots podcast. Hey, Donna.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. I am really good. And we're quite excited because we're bringing another series to our listeners. So I think, before we introduce this series, I think something that Donna and I are really keen to bring across in these episodes, and we were just discussing this before we pressed record, is around how there are always different perspectives to scenarios that our clients and our network go through. So we've covered at the start of the year, we did our goal setting series, which was received really well. And so in this particular series, we're going to be focusing on the responses and support for those who are experiencing restructures and the fallout of that particular event that can happen, and we see happen often in our work, don't we, Donna?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we first decided to create Procurement Pivots, actually, really, we were seeing so much change and transformation happen within the procurement landscape, and so many procurement professionals have been affected by restructure and, unfortunately, redundancy. Like, we saw an unprecedented amount, actually, of kind of redundancies taking place in procurement. And so, yeah, this feels like one of those topics that we just really want to kind of give it the attention it deserves, because I think it's probably one of those guarantees in this like volatile world that we're in right now, that change is going to keep continuing. And actually, none of us as individuals are going to be able to stop that from happening. But actually, it's really about thinking, how can you prepare yourself for it, and how can you, be, I suppose, really considered about how you then choose to respond when it does happen, if it does happen to you. I think this is going to be a really interesting series that I think, is going to be really relevant for a lot of people, definitely.
Yeah, totally. And it is, unfortunately, in today's world, it has been a common topic and a theme, hasn't it? As I said earlier, we're so keen to bring different perspectives to this because it impacts people in different ways, depending on the receiving end that you are at when it comes to a restructure. And yeah, we feel that bespoke support that we can often help with as coaches can really help someone to move through it in a way that works for them, and in a way that supports them to move out of it with confidence and with their self-esteem intact, right? So yeah, in today's episode, we're going to be focusing on that first aspect of what happens when a restructure means that you are made redundant or you are exiting the company. And Donna's going to take us through a lot of those aspects because it forms a key part of your work, doesn't it? And then in the next few episodes of this series, it's another 4-part series. We're going to be taking a look at how we can explore the element of what happens when you stay after a restructure, because there's also the people who are left behind are also impacted by these changes. We're also going to take a look in the 3rd part of the series at the leader, about the leader who's actually at the helm of the team, who are having to support their team through restructure. And then we're going to finish it off with looking at the team aspect. How can a team respond together to make sure that they can move through these events with confidence?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a really, really important topic covered across the series. So yeah, hopefully for any of you tuning in, it's going to resonate and it's going to be helpful no matter what your kind of situation is. So this isn't just for people that are experiencing this right now. It's also about preparing yourself for future changes. And
Yes.
changes, to be clear, restructures don't always result in redundancy. So this isn't all about redundancy at all, but it's preparing yourself as much as possible for those inevitable changes that are going to happen throughout your career.
Yeah, the only constant is change, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
brilliant. So where would you like to start with this one, Donna?
Well, I think as you've kind of like mentioned, a big part of the work that I've done actually over the last 18 months has been supporting individuals that have been affected by a restructure, which has resulted in redundancy. When I last looked at it, actually, I think it was about 40% of the people that I've supported now, their reason for coming to me was off the back of some sort of restructure or change or redundancy. So that is quite a significant proportion of people. Um, and yeah, it just can be an incredibly difficult time. Like sometimes, people leaving a business, through redundancy, like sometimes it's voluntary redundancy, so they've had the choice. But sometimes it's kind of, it wasn't a choice, this restructure and then this redundancy scenario has been forced onto you. And so yeah, I think where I wanted to start with it was just to say, that we know that this can be an incredibly difficult time when you experience this. Sometimes you kind of have thought it was coming, but sometimes it can just almost feel like it's totally come out of the blue and at a really bad time in your life when, you've got other stuff going on. Because, of course, these situations don't wait for you to be in a perfect moment in your life outside of work. And unfortunately I've had to support individuals that are going through this whilst dealing with family bereavements and
Mm.
long-term illness and caring for family members and like lots of other really notable major kind of life situations that they're dealing with at the same time, which just obviously kind of, escalates the feeling and the emotion. So I think really where I wanted to start was, kind of, I suppose just to acknowledge like just absolute range of feelings that I see people experience. Everyone is really different and everyone's situation is really different. Every restructure is going to affect those people affected in really different ways, dependent on what their kind of mindset was going into it, depending on what else they've got going on in their life at that moment in time, depending on whether they've been affected by restructure or change before. Because again, some of the people that I've supported, like this isn't the first time that their role has been made redundant. And there's been a few occasions where actually, again, through no fault of their own and it's no kind of reflection of their own performance. They've done brilliant work in the roles they're in, but actually sometimes in a really short space of time, a matter of years, they've had multiple redundancies. So that's incredibly difficult to deal with when your confidence has already been knocked previously to then
Mm.
deal with it again. So yeah, I just thought it'd be good to kind of, I suppose, share some of that kind of range of emotions, because and again, I know you obviously have done a lot of work with people kind of that have been affected by, change and restructures, etc. But you know, an individual is going to feel a complete range of emotions. Like, some of them might be a bit relieved actually, some of the
Mm.
time. But one day they're feeling one way, the next way they're feeling really anxious and really worried and, really concerned about what the impact is versus another day they're feeling really positive and saying, no, do
Mm.
you know what, this is going to lead to a better outcome for me, and I'm going to find an environment that I'm kind of happier in. So yeah, I think just the kind of any emotion, don't kind of judge yourself on how you're feeling. Like, those feelings are to be expected, and a whole range, a whole raft of feelings. And, some days you're going to feel motivated and proactive, and other days you might just not even want to get out of bed. And all
Yeah.
of that is kind of, I think you need to kind of listen to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've touched on so many important points there. Like when it comes to the emotions that you might feel going through this situation, there is not one way to feel. Like there is not one way that it is acceptable. Feelings are not mutually exclusive. You can feel relief on one day and feel ashamed on another day.
Yeah.
The amount of shame that it can bring about in people as well, thinking that it's a reflection on them and their capability. And so there are no good and bad emotions. You know,
Mm.
emotions are part of our human experience. They pass through us. They some mask other feelings that might be going on. So it's really important to actually take note of how you're feeling and recognize what that think of it as data about what it's telling you, because yeah, the, again, we've talked about the should so many times, haven't we? About I
Yeah.
should be feeling this, or I should be feeling that, or but yeah, that there is no one way to feel, and how you feel going through a process like this is how you feel.
Mm. Yeah.
So I think, to be able to talk through that with somebody, to be able to sit with it for a
Yeah.
bit, which
Yeah.
which isn't easy, depending on
Mm.
how you do respond to emotions anyway. In general, sometimes we feel flooded by our emotions, sometimes we deny our emotions. Some people can be very good at compartmentalizing them and putting them away, but then keep struggling with a particular aspect of it. So yeah, it's really important to sit with it, I think, because it's the stuff that doesn't get talked about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, coming back to one of the words you just used, shame, actually, unfortunately, I think that is one of those feelings that comes up a lot in the conversations I have, like embarrassment, like the worry, like what are people going to think? How am I going to even tell people? Like some of the individuals, like I've supported a couple of individuals actually. We were already working together when then this change or transformation then happened whilst working together. And there was certainly one instance where, outside of close family members, I was the first person that they spoke to, and they already trusted me, actually. Even telling me as their trusted coach, where they've opened up about lots of stuff, personal stuff previously, it can be really difficult to
Mm.
have even those conversations, and and really emotional saying it out loud. And I think that is it's a really common feeling that I've seen in people, that they're just really really concerned about, how are people going to kind of hear that they've been made redundant, and actually, what is the connotation? Like, are people going to be thinking, well, clearly they're going to worry that I didn't perform, and that's why my role has been made redundant? And, it's, often these decisions, they're not based on the individual performance of the individuals. These are organizational wide restructures. And in some cases, it's just, it's kind of as crude as, right, every department needs to lose 10% of their headcount, whether they're performing or not. It's like, sometimes it's kind of a blanket approach across the entire organization. So yeah, I think just allow yourself to kind of accept how you feel, however it is that you feel. And just kind of, I think it's, yeah, just, yeah, like you say, sit with how you're feeling, and recognize that how you're feeling today, might be very different to how you're feeling tomorrow
Yeah.
versus the next day. And it can be a roller coaster, and you can start to feel better and then have a wobble. And, kind of, it's not necessarily a kind of a linear journey, sometimes a bit like grief, I would say as well, kind of, other forms of personal grief. It's not necessarily that kind of every single day you feel better and better and better. I think yeah, accepting that it could be a bit of a bumpy journey for you.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the word grief, because actually there are different forms of grief. We obviously talk about bereavement and loss, but grief can be experienced in different ways, and actually grief does come up a lot in these scenarios because they're grieving a past part of their career, or a part of their career that they're moving on from, which
Yeah.
actually isn't, if it's not by choice, or even if it is by choice, you're grieving a stage of your life that is no longer true for you or relevant for you. So yeah, it's yeah, that word, it feels a bit strange to be putting it in a non-bereavement context, but it is actually what a lot of people can experience.
Yeah. And I think, like, again, we came onto this when we did our identity episode, but so many people tie their identity to their current role.
Yeah.
And so when this change happens, like, actually people just kind of often just are questioning, like, who am I then, and what is my purpose? Because, so many people tie their absolute reason for being to their, who I am is I'm a procurement director in this environment, and suddenly they're not that person anymore. They're that person, but they're not performing that role anymore. And that can be really, really difficult for people. And I've definitely seen it. Um, sometimes, I've seen people that have been worried about, turning, like, saying yes to speaking opportunities when they've spoken previously, because they're like, well, what can I bring? Because I'm not currently working. And, it really saddens me when I hear that, because actually your knowledge, your expertise, your value, your impact, it's all still there. Actually it's not tied to, it's tied to you. It's not tied to that organization and the position. So you still have a huge amount to kind of offer and share. But a lot of people, you see people suddenly stop posting on LinkedIn that maybe they posted before, because they feel that their value has to be tied to them doing a particular role.
Mm, yeah, and it's a huge thing. Like you say, we did cover off some of this in the identity episode, and
Mm,
I think that sometimes when it comes to that identity, it's not something that, sometimes it can creep up on you, right? It might not be the first thing that comes up when you're going through the stage of the shock, or that, or making that decision. It can come up later on when we might not even realize how much of our identity we wrap up with
yeah,
our careers until we're in a position that part of that is taken away. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
such a great point.
I
So
think,
let's
like, oh, go on,
no,
sorry.
no, no, go on.
I was going to say, like, one of the big things, going through that experience, whatever your version of that experience is, like, it can for many, like, really kind of take a dent to your self-confidence, your self-belief. And so actually I think, like, this is then the moment that you need to be so kind to yourself when something like this has happened to you, and and really enable yourself still to recognize particularly things like your strengths and the impact that you've had. But just I think really think about how you're using your time during
Mhm.
that moment as well, because I think, like, yeah, just being really kind to yourself and maximizing your chances of being able to sleep at night, kind of, like, things that kind of that can just make such a difference to your mindset. Like, I think, this thing has happened, and it may well have affected your confidence. And so actually then I think, it's kind of thinking about what are the things you can do for yourself that are going to help you to feel better, are going to help you to feel more positive, are going to help you to want to get up out of bed in the morning. So it's kind of, don't just focus on the job search, for instance, also do some things that ordinarily you wouldn't have the opportunity to do when you're in work, whatever those things are for you. For some people, it might be going out in the fresh air or doing exercise, but it's actually really think about what are those things that you can do that are going to help you to start to rebuild your confidence and allow yourself to recognize, yes, this scenario has happened to me, but I've got a lot to give, and I'm really, I'm ready to give it to the next organization, or I'm ready to start to move into that next chapter.
Yeah, and it's amazing how, like you say, if they can take that time to step out or step away from the figurative desk, so to speak,
Yeah.
if they can go do something different, it's amazing how that breakthrough in your thinking can happen. So you know, it can be hard to put that opportunity hat on, right? It can be hard to think, okay, well, what am I going to do while I'm waiting to hear back from that job, or while I'm waiting to go and do something new, or while I'm going through this period. It can be hard because if you are feeling a lack of self-belief, or you're feeling those feelings of shame that we talked about, if you respond under pressure in a way of, well, no, I need to just try harder, I need to just try harder, it can be really hard to step away. But to have that mindset, or that view of, well, I can afford to take a break for 5 minutes, for half an hour,
Mhm.
for an hour, just to get some clear headspace. It can make all the difference.
Yeah. And I know we've spoken about it before, but I've seen so many occasions where this really difficult scenario has happened to someone, and
Mm.
often, like, it can then lead to, like, the most difficult time can often be followed by, a real step up or move forward in a really amazing way. I've seen lots of people that, they've moved on to something that felt more aligned, that felt like a better version of what they're doing, that they're actually enjoying what they're doing more than they were before. And actually, they've gone through this really incredibly difficult time, but where they've ended up is a much happier, much more fulfilled place than where they were before. So they've actually been able to move forward really positively, but it's so hard to see it when you're in the thick of it.
Of
So
course.
hard.
Yeah, and we don't see it when we're in the thick of it. You can't see the wood
Yeah.
for the trees. So it's those little small consistent steps when we're talking about that action of how to respond. What can we do to set ourselves up to make this, take the small steps, take the small actions to build up to something bigger. And then the outcome is usually, like you say, they're in a better place if they've done that
Yeah.
intentional planning.
Yeah.
So to really focus on that can really help to move people through, especially if they've lost, I imagine, if they've lost that all sense of routine because they've been made redundant,
Yeah.
it can be really hard to find that get up and go, that
Yeah.
momentum. So yeah, to be able to take those small steps, even if they don't feel significant in the moment, it's amazing when you look back and you go, oh, actually, I was able to move through that, and then you've
Yeah.
ended up in a better
Yeah.
place. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And so many people say these days, looking for a job, it's like a full-time job in itself. And what I have seen is like people do respond really differently when they've been affected by redundancy. Some people will literally replace those working hours with job search activity for the same amount of time. They're sat on the job boards, they're literally looking online all day long, they're, playing around with the CV. But it's like, that's such a lot. It's such a lot to be spending 8, 9, 10 hours, like some people even longer, in a day, focus just on that kind of job searching activity. And just because you're busy in your job search doesn't always, unfortunately, mean that you're focusing on the right types of activities. And sometimes if you have a bit more of a kind of scattergun approach, it's less likely to work. You're more likely to get knockbacks, and that's more likely to keep chipping away at your confidence levels. So it can be incredibly hard. Like I do appreciate, like, suddenly you're not sure where your income is going to be coming from. It's a really uncertain time. And obviously everyone's financial situation is very different, but for some people, they are the main earner in the family. They've got a family, they've got this whole household that are relying on them. Like that's a massive weight on your shoulders. So do totally appreciate that, sometimes people feel like they have to go straight into that reactive mode.
Mm.
But just taking some time just to really get clear on actually, like, what is it I really want to do next? And really focusing on, really important things like the strengths, the achievements that you've had previously, the impact, the difference you've made, the positive feedback that you've had throughout your career, like enables you to really recognize and believe like what you have to offer the next organization. But so many people, the first thing they do is update the CV, but without really taking that time to kind of think, well, what is it? What is it I'd love to do next? Let's see this, like you say, opportunity mindset. Let's see this as an exciting opportunity to kind of shape my future career in a happier, more fulfilling way. You do get to decide what you do next, and so taking some time to think about that can just be really, really helpful. Um,
And and also, if you don't mind me saying there as well, having that perspective to be able to feel empowered again, because obviously if these changes haven't happened by choice, things can feel so out of your control. To actually
yeah,
gain some of that empowerment back can be huge for somebody, right? Can feel like, oh, actually, I can control this tiny bit. And when we do feel like we have control,
yeah.
it's amazing what other opportunities we might see or what other doors we might consider walking through that we hadn't before.
Yeah, and I know we touched on we did more than touch on it on the recent positioning episode that we did, where I was kind of talking through the steps that I support people with and that I recommend kind of really thinking about. And I think for me, this is why I talk about positioning so much. Like we have been in a much more competitive, much tougher marketplace, and we can't control the economy as individuals. Well, some individuals can, clearly, but most of us can't. We can't necessarily control the obvious job market, but actually we can control how we set ourselves up and the things that we do. And actually, it can feel great when you kind of decide what you want to do and then you do it. Like you feel really positive that you've kind of stuck to those things that you've set out that you want to do. And, that positivity will come through in your confidence, in your conversations, in your communication with people as well. So I think, really thinking about how you are going to position yourself going forward rather than just reacting can be really, really helpful. And it might be helpful if you're listening to this and if you're experiencing any of this, go back and have a listen because in that episode, I can't remember what episode number it was now, but recently there was the episode and I talked through the kind of 6 steps that I recommend people kind of go through. So I would yeah, definitely kind of recommend that.
I think that
But
was
the other
episode
thing,
30.
oh, okay, so not that long ago then. Okay, thank you. I think the other thing that I wanted to kind of talk about before we finished today's one was regrets. This when something happens that you haven't chosen, that you haven't decided, I think this is often the time where people will start looking back and saying, oh, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd responded to those recruiters when they contacted me and I didn't need them. I wish I'd kept in touch with those former colleagues. And I do meet and work with a lot of people that initially there is quite a lot of those kind of, in hindsight, I wish I'd done this, or the things that are really kind of frustrated that they haven't focused on more. Um, and I think whilst it's, I think it's good to acknowledge those things, but actually sometimes kind of sticking with the regret can still stop you from moving forward as well. And so it's kind of like, yeah, okay, do you know what? In an ideal world, maybe it would have been great if we'd done these things previously, but we can't change the past, can we? But we can change the future. And it's kind of, it's trying to not sit with that regret for too long. And enable yourself to then think, okay, well, I haven't done that historically, but I can change that now. So, what am I going to do now? And what is that next step and the step after and the step after? But I think like the networking piece, and I know we've touched on this previously, and we will certainly touch on it again in the future. Networking and sort of building your personal brand, they're two of the areas I would say that when this change has happened, and sometimes it's totally out of the blue and it's really unexpected, often that's when people are saying, I wish I'd developed my network. I knew it was important, I just didn't bother because I didn't need it. I wish I'd focused on how I'm presenting myself, how I'm building my visibility externally, not just internally. And so, I would definitely encourage anyone listening right now, to kind of almost think about what are those things that you might regret in the future. If something did change in your role unexpectedly, what are the things that you would hope you would have in place to set yourself up to be able to respond to that well? And so, yeah, it's almost kind of just being really proactive with some of those things that could be a later regret to avoid the regret in the future.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's so much to say about regret. We're looking back on something with today's lens, right? That rose-tinted glasses thing. Oh, if I had my time again, I would do it this way. From a networking perspective, my gosh, like I didn't when I was in house, like networking wasn't a thing really. And when you've got a young family, that also impacts your ability to network. Your personal circumstances, depending on the type of networking we're talking about, can be subject to, it can dictate, how we approach things. However, um, like you say, if we have the opportunity to reflect on those regrets, then what can we do to be proactive to future-proof ourselves for the future?
Yeah.
It's so, not to give you must give yourself that self-compassion because you did your best with what you had at the time, looking back on those moments. But yes, let's learn about what we can tweak, what we can do differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So are we going to have some takeaways on this one? I
Mm.
guess for anyone, I'm setting myself up here now. We hadn't discussed this beforehand, but for anyone kind of listening that maybe is experiencing this right now, what would be a takeaway for you? And then I'll kind of share as well.
Well, it is that normalizing of feelings, isn't it? It's I mean, it can be really hard because in the corporate world, there can be so many perceptions of how, there's no room for emotions here, or, that's not the case everywhere, but it does still happen. Whereas it's the very thing that can create culture and dictate how you handle your career and your decisions moving forward, how you manage leadership, etc. So yeah, normalize those feelings, sit with them, understand what it is they're telling you, accept that you are allowed to feel something
Yeah.
that you might deem like a positive emotion versus a negative emotion, and that can change from day to day. So let's
Mm,
normalize that, definitely.
yeah. Yeah. And I would say for me, probably it's just that kind of being kind to yourself in a couple of different ways. It's allowing yourself to see the positives in who you are and what you've done previously and what you bring, but also just allowing yourself time to process, to kind of to go through this journey of what you're experiencing, and allow yourself some time to do stuff that you love as well, because if you do stuff that you love, you're going to feel more positive, you've got endorphins, etc., and that's really good for your mental health, which when you go through something like this, protecting your mental health and your sleep and your general well-being is like so much more important than it is ordinarily. Because we all know what it's like. I do certainly. You have a few nights of really bad sleep, and suddenly it's really difficult to kind of think clearly. It's really difficult to see the positives. You're picking up on the difficulties and the challenge, and not seeing the positives as well. And so I think just like try to use that time, which can be a gift sometimes as well, even though it's this really difficult situation, it can allow you to do some of those things that you've not been able to do whilst you've been working. And that can help to rebuild like your kind of your mindset and your kind of your general well-being actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great point that. So, in terms of, so we've talked about normalizing the feelings, we've talked about the what can I do while I'm in this situation. Is there anything else that's landed for you on this episode, Donna?
I think just, if you are listening right now and you have been affected recently, and if you haven't yet secured or yet started kind of exploring a role, I would encourage you to kind of listen to that episode that we did recently, episode 30, according to Laura, on positioning, which is for me essentially kind of breaking down like almost step by step different parts. It's kind of try to get as clear as you can on kind of where you want to head, like what you want doing next. Then spend some time just really focusing on your own positives, your story, your narrative, your strengths, what you love doing, what you really enjoy, what you know you do well. And then start thinking about, okay, how do I show some of this to people on my CV, on my LinkedIn? That I think the kind of developing the right relationships with people in your network, and how can you set yourself up so that you're starting to think about preparing for interviews even before you've got interviews, because when the interview requests start coming in, ideally, it's good to be in a position that you've kind of maybe practiced some of your answers, even though you don't know the actual company. So you can't do everything at once. Like you absolutely can't do everything at once. And actually kind of doing it bit by bit can be really helpful. Like just maybe be kind to yourself and say, right, today, tomorrow, what is the one thing that I want to do that's going to help me to move forward?
Mm,
Not the 10 things, not the 20 things, not the, oh, I need to do my CV, I need to apply for all these roles, I need to da da da. It's like that's not going to work. Like actually, work in small chunks, even when it comes to your CV, knowing you need to update your CV, that's overwhelming. That feels like a really big task. So break it down. What is the first part of your CV? Okay, well, maybe tomorrow I'm going to update my current role.
hmm
Maybe the next day I'll do the prior two roles. Maybe the next day I'll do the personal profile. Like always just break it down. Don't give yourself this big thing because that feels overwhelming. Just work out how can you break it down. And I would say, of course, like, think about who can help and support you, which could be a coach, like someone like us. It could be someone that you know personally. It could be someone from your professional life, but having someone to kind of share and bounce ideas off of and look over your CV for you and just talk about it, like having the space to talk about those emotions can be really, really helpful to enable you to start processing them and then move forward positively.
Yeah, no, great points and great insight. Thank you, Donna. And yeah, at the end of the day, we're here to help, but also, lean on people that you trust to support. If you can't do that with a coach, because I think something else that I guess we haven't touched on is that how isolating this situation can sometimes
Oh,
feel.
incredibly. Yeah,
So,
really, really
yeah,
difficult. Yeah. And I think just to add, like, in addition to working with paying clients, I do a lot of free things as well. So I do free procurement job search surgeries where people are, welcome to come along, lots of masterclasses, etc. So if you are experiencing this and you know, like you can't work with a coach, like, financially, or you're not ready to, still feel free to reach out, because it might be that there's other things that I'm doing, free things that you're more than welcome to come and be part of as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Donna, for sharing those insights. And it is a tricky situation to move through this. And this is why it's important to us to do this series, right? And to look at different perspectives. So we're going to look at, in the next episode next week, we're going to look at the topic of what happens when you stay
Yeah.
following a restructure, and the impact that that can have on individuals.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
thanks.
looking forward to that one.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much for your time, and thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, take care. See you
Take care.
later.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Procurement Pivots. We hope today's episode gave you actionable tips to help you to continue to move forward in your procurement career.
If you enjoyed the conversation, follow our episodes, share them with others, and please support us on our social media channels for others that might be interested to tune in.